Who is the man who founded 2,000 years of the Chinese Empire? Welcome to Collapse, where history comes to life and every video takes you into the fate of those who have shaped the world. Today, let's step into an era where one man redrew the contours of eternity. In a world torn by wars and ambitions, he rose above kings to become the emperor. From the tumultuous rivers of the Yangtze to the walls raised against the desert's borders, his name echoes like thunder engraved in stone, Qin Shi Huang. Forger of a colossal empire, architect of a unified China, he imposed his vision through fire, iron, and order, giving birth to a reign that would span 2 millennia. But behind the legend of the all-powerful ruler, what kind of man was he really? What burning ambition drove him to challenge time itself? But before embarking on a new adventure, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to miss nothing. Thank you, and have a good journey. Towards the end of the 4th century before Christ, and throughout the 3rd century before Christ, the world is marked by civilizations in full transformation. It is a time of political experimentation, military advances, and major cultural changes. Each region must be placed in its context to appreciate the scale of these changes. We will successively explore the Far East, India, the Near East, the Mediterranean, Africa, Northern Europe, the Americas, and Oceania, before concluding on the networks of ideas and goods circulating at the time. This panorama, covering the period from 300 to 200 before Christ, highlights the great political, economic, and cultural balances. In the northeast of Asia, China is divided between several rival kingdoms, called the Warring States, like Qi, Chu, Yan, Han, Zhao, Wei, and Qin, which dispute supremacy over varied territories. This fragmentation, stemming from the end of the Spring and Autumn period, circa 5th century before Christ, is reinforced by growing political rivalries. The kingdoms have complex administrations, inherited from reforms aimed at strengthening central authority, consolidating the economy, and raising large armies. Military innovation is crucial, notably thanks to the crossbow with a bronze trigger, which allows increased firing power at medium range and offers a decisive tactical advantage. Chinese bronze smiths, heirs to a metallurgical tradition, not only manufacture the mechanisms of these crossbows, but also sophisticated armor, enhancing the reputation of local armies. Another factor disrupting the balance of power is the introduction of cavalry from the steppes of Central Asia. These riders, already experienced in equestrian art, adapt their harassment and rapid withdrawal tactics to the armies of the warring states. This integration of nomadic tactics into sedentary armies illustrates exchanges between China and its neighbors. At the turn of 300 before Christ, the Far East is a hub of military and administrative reforms where each state seeks to impose its domination. South of the Himalayas, India is undergoing a period of unification and upheaval. Around 321, before Christ, the Nanda dynasty, which controlled much of the subcontinent, disappears to give way to Chandragupta Maurya, often regarded as the founder of the first great Indian empire. Thanks to a centralized administration and a powerful army, the Nanda had consolidated their power, but the arrival of Chandragupta Maurya, supported by the strategist Chanakya, changes the political scene. Upon ascending to the throne, he leads campaigns to extend his power, taking advantage of the collapse of Greek forces in the region after the death of Alexander the Great in 323 before Christ. Trans-Himalayan exchanges are also essential. Despite natural obstacles, trade caravans and embassies circulate between the Maurya court at Pataliputra and courts in Central Asia and Hellenistic regions. Religious ideas, especially the nascent Buddhism, and precious goods, like fine stones and spices, reinforce India's role as a commercial and spiritual center. The Seleucid Empire in the west, a part of the partition of Alexander's empire, stretches from Asia Minor to the foothills of the Indus. The Seleucids inherit the Macedonian military tradition and a centralized administration. However, their domination is contested by the Maurya, first under Chandragupta, and then his grandson Ashoka, who compete for control of the Punjab. Furthermore, the Parthians, originating from Iranian tribes, emerge as a new force. Political clashes are frequent, marked by fragile alliances and treaties, foreshadowing a lasting rivalry between India and the Western Asian powers. The legacy of Alexander the Great is still present in the Hellenistic world, although his empire disintegrated after his death. It mainly divides into dynasties stemming from his generals. The Ptolemies in Egypt control the Nile Valley and preserve a strong Greek culture in Alexandria. The Antigonids in Macedonia attempt to maintain influence over Greece and the Aegean Sea. The Seleucids, dominating from Syria to Mesopotamia, complete this picture. Each Hellenistic monarchy seeks to balance Greek elites and local populations. Greek culture spreads in large cities, where settlers and officials establish institutions like gymnasiums and libraries. In Alexandria, the library becomes a major intellectual center. However, Greek domination encounters resistance, sometimes supported by local aristocracies. Meanwhile, Rome, at the western end of the Mediterranean, asserts itself as an ambitious republic. Although it has not yet conquered the entire Italian peninsula, completed around 270 before Christ, it prepares for the Punic Wars against Carthage, a powerful Phoenician thalassocracy in North Africa. Feeling threatened, Rome develops its military and administrative apparatus, paving the way for its Mediterranean dominance. Around 300-200 before Christ, the Mediterranean is in full ferment between Greek influences, nascent Roman expansions, and ancient local traditions. In Africa, the Kingdom of Kush, located in Nubia south of Egypt, partly inherits Egyptian culture, especially under the so-called Kushite pharaohs. In the 3rd century before Christ, diplomatic and trade exchanges with Ptolemaic Egypt favor the circulation of gold, ivory, and other valuable merchandise. Nubian necropolises testify to the funerary wealth and architectural artistry of this kingdom, which preserves its identity despite Egypt's influence. In North Africa, Carthage, founded by Queen Dido, dominates the Mediterranean Sea with a powerful fleet and a network of trading posts. Master of maritime trade, it supplies coastal nations with luxury products, metals, and cereals. This prosperity arouses Rome's envy, heralding the upcoming wars, notably in Sicily, a crossroads of Roman and Carthaginian interests. In Northern Europe, Celtic societies extend from Central and Western Europe to the British Isles, Bohemia, and around the Danube Basin. Their tribal organization and warrior elite are distinguished by intricate art. The Celts, influential in craftsmanship and trade, venture as far as Iberia and Italy, worrying the Greeks and Etruscans. The Oppida, political and commercial centers, structure a network of intra-Celtic exchanges. In the Americas, at the end of the late Olmec horizon, the Olmec civilization, which appeared around 1200 before Christ, heavily influences Mesoamerica, notably in arts and cosmological organization. Although its heart, centered around San Lorenzo and La Venta, is in decline, its legacy remains present in the religious practices and crafts of neighboring cultures. The The first Maya centers emerge in the lowlands of the Peiten, heralding the classic Maya civilization. In parallel, the Chavin civilization influences the Andes between the 10th and 5th centuries before Christ, before more complex societies, like the Moche, appear on Peru's northern coast. These civilizations build pyramid temples and develop irrigation techniques. In Oceania, Austronesian migration waves have been traversing the Pacific for millennia. Between 300 and 200 before Christ, island societies in Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, organized according to local resources, practice long-distance navigation, promoting inter-island exchanges. To understand these dynamics, we must mention the circulation of goods and ideas. Around 300-200 before Christ, although the Silk Road was not yet formalized, merchants were already transporting exotic products such as silk, jade, and spices in exchange for precious metals and horses. These caravans demonstrated the need for safer routes, marked by fortified stations. Peoples like the Sogdians and the Bactrians took advantage, becoming key intermediaries between the East and the West. Later, these routes would serve as channels for spreading religious ideas such as Buddhism and Manichaeism. At the same time, iron metallurgy became widespread. Iron, more resistant than bronze, improved agricultural tools and promoted the growth of artisanal production, strengthening commercial exchanges. This advancement also altered social structures, notably by opening some communities to forging techniques and allowing for the emergence of new elites. Iron weapons, more effective, contributed to the military expansion of certain cities. Diplomatic contacts and travelers' accounts compared imperial concepts. In China, the idea of a son of heaven, Tianzi, emerged, while in India, inscriptions in Prakrit reflected an ideal of Dharma promoted by the Maurya sovereigns, notably Ashoka. In the Hellenistic world, the king was honored as a soter, or hero, whereas in Rome, power rested on the people and its magistrates, with no king, but with generals elevated in glory through their victories. This quick overview shows a world in excitement between 300 and 200 before Christ. The Far East experienced intense competition between states, India, and Southwest Asia, reorganized under the influence of the Mauryas and Seleucids, and the Mediterranean saw the affirmation of Hellenistic kingdoms and the rise of Rome. Similar dynamics occurred in Africa and Northern Europe between the Kingdom of Kush, Carthage, and Celtic peoples. In America, the Olmec and Maya civilizations emerged, while in the Andes, the Moche developed. Oceania continued its island migrations, enriching its maritime societies. The early stages of the Silk Road and iron metallurgy forged links between distant regions, preparing the ancient world for wider exchanges. These events would lead to the formation of centralized empires and political innovations that would shape history. In the 3rd century before Christ, China was fragmented into several rival states, each seeking military, economic, and political dominance. It was in this context that Ying Zheng was born, the future Qin Shi Huang, unifier of China. His childhood, marked by court intrigues and doubts about his father's identity, unfolded in Handan, the capital of the state of Zhao. It was there that he met his mother, Zhao Ji, the businessman and strategist Lu Buwei, and an exiled prince of Qin. Handan, a fortified city, was one of the most powerful of the time. Its bustling markets, military garrisons, and royal court made it a nerve center. Lu Buwei, a shrewd merchant, climbed the social ladder thanks to his strategic mind. He became a major player in diplomatic relations between states by getting close to ruling families. Zhao Ji, sometimes called Lady Zhao, was a high-ranking concubine, recognized for her beauty and intelligence. Her ties with Lu Buwei are unclear. Some say she belonged to his household, others that she was first at the court of Zhao. Their relationship took a decisive turn when a prince of Qin, Yiren, arrived in Handan as a political hostage. Yiren, although of royal blood, lived under the surveillance of the court of Zhao, seeking a way to return to Qin and reclaim his rights. Lu Buwei's role in Yiren's destiny was crucial. Quickly recognizing the prince's potential, Lu Buwei, a man of great intelligence, offered him decisive political and financial assistance. Yiren, lacking support, found in him an ally capable of helping him escape and return to the court of Qin. The question of Ying Zheng's paternity remains a historical controversy, particularly because of the introduction of Zhao Ji to Yiren by Lu Buwei. Some accounts suggest that Zhao Ji was already pregnant by Lu Buwei when she was presented to Yiren, fueling the rumor that Ying Zheng was his son rather than Yiren's. The records of the grand historian let the doubt persist, without providing definitive proof. Ying Zheng was born in 259, before Christ in Handan, a city shaken by military tensions, particularly between Qin and Zhao. The environment in which the prince grew up was marked by violent rivalry. Lu Buwei and Zhao Ji sought to ensure their security and that of the young prince in this unstable climate. When the war between Qin and Zhao reached its peak, Lu Buwei organized the escape of Yiren, Zhao Ji, and Ying Zheng to protect their lives. Although the exact date of this escape is uncertain, it likely occurred around 257-256 before Christ, at a time when the war between the two states was most intense. The journey to Xianyang, the capital of Qin, was difficult and dangerous, marked by detours, disguises, and secret support. Despite the obstacles, they eventually reached the Qin court, where Ying Zheng assumed a central role. He inherited the throne after the disappearance of other heirs and became King Zhuangxiang, reigned from 250 to 247 before Christ. Zhao Ji became the queen consort, and Lu Buwei became the chancellor of Qin, the strongman of the kingdom. In this new arrangement, Lu Buwei became regent and oversaw the education of Ying Zheng, based on the legalist reforms of Xianyang. The child was trained to understand that the strength of the state lay in discipline, centralization of power, and a loyal army. Ying Zheng received comprehensive training in martial arts and military strategy, essential fields during the Warring States period. Theories on warfare, such as those of Sunzi, were ingrained in the culture of the time. Under Lu Buwei's guidance, he learned horseback riding, archery, and the mastery of the bronze crossbow, a key innovation in battles. The Qin court, renowned for its mastery of weapons, focused on technical innovation, convinced that military power relied on organization and technology. The young heir could not neglect these skills if he wanted to inspire confidence in his troops. Lu Buwei, having become the key man of the administration, also played a paternal role in Ying Zheng's training. Although the paternity of the latter was subject to debate, it was Lu Buwei's wisdom that guided the young prince. He instilled in him a political vision, the state above all, the law as a guarantor of stability, and a strong sovereign to ensure peace through strength and fear. In 250 before Christ, Yiren became King Zhuangxiang, Zhao Ji was queen, and Ying Zheng was designated as crown prince. These years, 250-247 before Christ, marked a turning point for the young prince, who carefully observed the court and learned prudence, acutely aware of the plots thriving there. The rapid rise of Lu Buwei aroused jealousy and suspicion, prompting Ying Zheng to surround himself with loyal followers and assert his authority. Upon the death of his father in 247 before Christ, Ying Zheng, aged 12 or 13, ascended the throne. Even though this moment marked the beginning of his reign, his early years were dominated by Lu Buwei's influence and speculations about his legitimacy. Raised in a context of geopolitical and familial tensions, he received an education marked by rigor and ambition against the backdrop of legalist reforms. Thus, he learned to navigate a complex court and develop his strategic sense. The early years of Ying Zheng reveal how his education and experiences shaped his personality. His relationship with Lu Buwei, sometimes seen as a spiritual father, sometimes as a schemer, marked his youth. His mother, Zhao Ji, was at the center of a scandal concerning Ying Zheng's paternity and embodied his legitimate origin. Handan, the city where he was born, represents a past where, paradoxically, he was a hostage of the kingdom of Zhao. From 259 to 247, before Christ, Ying Zheng went from a child born in an enemy city, surrounded by rumors about his paternity, to crown prince in Xianyang, the capital of Qin, before ascending the throne as a teenager. These early years are crucial to understanding how he envisions power, centralized authority, guided by an iron hand. His experience of adversity and political intrigues drove him to tighten the reins of power, thus foreshadowing the ruler he would become, unifier of China. This early journey, marked by Lu Buwei and the ambitions of the Qin court, would lay the foundations for a transformative reign, whose impact on ancient China would be colossal. When Ying Zheng ascended the throne of Qin in 247, before Christ, at only 13 years old, this early accession seemed surprising for a young king in an already powerful state. However, the Qin was a kingdom of drastic reforms and authoritarian leaders. During his first decade of reign, from 247 to 230, before Christ, Ying Zheng and his entourage faced major challenges: family power struggles, strengthening structures inherited from reformers, and establishing infrastructures. The kingdom of Qin thus reinforced its internal power and laid the foundations of a centralized state. At Ying Zheng's arrival, the court of Qin was marked by political intrigues. The system inspired by Shangyang, died in 338 before Christ, introduced the primacy of law, fei, and meritocracy. Under this model, noble titles were awarded based on skills on the battlefield or in administration, and severe punishments were applied to offenders. This legalist system would endure during Ying Zheng's minority, but the question remained as to who would truly hold power within his entourage. From the beginning of his reign, Ying Zheng had to deal with familial rivalries. The main scandal involved the eunuch Lao Ai, close to Zhao Ji, the king's mother. In ancient China, eunuchs had an important political role, accessing the palace's female circles. Lao Ai, who reportedly manipulated his position to gain exceptional trust, allegedly harbored ambitions of power. Rumors suggested his attempt to overthrow the dynasty by taking advantage of Zhao Ji's waning influence. When the conspiracy erupted, Ying Zheng, although still a teenager, reacted firmly. Lao Ai and his accomplices were executed, marking a turning point in Qin's politics. The young king showed that he would not tolerate any threats to his power, even from his immediate entourage. Ying Zheng's mother lost her influence and was sidelined, while the young sovereign gradually took control of state affairs. Ying Zheng, distancing himself from clan struggles, chose to strengthen the unity of the country through Xiangyang's legalist apparatus. Many reforms already undertaken needed to be consolidated. The merit-based promotion system, rather than seniority or noble birth, was encouraged. The king and his advisors believed that military and economic efficiency required the services of the most competent, regardless of their rank. A heroic soldier could rise socially, just as a talented administrator, even from a modest family, could ascend to a local governor position. This approach cemented the loyalty of emerging elites and offered the people of Qin an opportunity to rise beyond their rural condition. Simultaneously, Ying Zheng carried out a cadastral reorganization by establishing a uniform cadaster, where each plot of land was assessed according to its area, agricultural potential, and taxation. This census was crucial for fiscal policy and allowed for the harmonization of land data, reducing conflicts between nobility and peasants. Thanks to this system, cultivators enjoyed a certain stability of rights, while administrators' reports were regularly sent to Xianyang for verification. Between 247 and 230, before Christ, these reforms consolidated state authority, limiting the rebellious inclinations of traditional nobility. Another pillar of Ying Zheng's policy was the assertion of a severe law, or Fei, inspired by legalism. This doctrine, which considered human nature as selfish and likely to break the rules for personal gain, imposed strict punishments such as corporal penalties, confiscation of property, exile, or execution, regardless of social status. This equality before the law represented a major novelty in a Chinese world marked by aristocratic privileges. Ying Zheng believed that this iron law was essential to lastingly bind the kingdom. Between 247 and 230. Before Christ, it became the foundation of Qin's administration, ensuring order under royal authority and remaining a noteworthy aspect of Qin's political legacy. These reforms were accompanied by major infrastructure projects deemed essential for strengthening the kingdom's prosperity and security. The Zhengguo Canal, initiated towards the end of the 3rd century before Christ, was one of the most remarkable. This irrigation system, designed by engineer Zheng Guo, allowed thousands of hectares of agricultural land in the Qin region to be fertilized. Far from harming Qin, this project strengthened its power by improving agricultural production and nourishing a population better prepared for war and the construction of weaponry. The state of Qin had been investing massively in weapon production for several generations. From the time of the Warring States, it distinguished itself by its use of the bronze trigger crossbow, allowing it to quickly train formidable archers. Its cavalry, inspired by the tactics of the steppes, assured it superiority over its enemies. To maintain these forces, Qin needed arsenals capable of forging, repairing, and storing weapons and ammunition. Between 247 and 230. Before Christ, under Ying Zheng, these production sites were organized throughout the territory, near transport routes and mining regions. The arsenals were strategically placed to ensure rapid supply to the troops. Archaeological reports attest to the quality of these workshops, utilizing multiple specialized artisans. The strict legalist discipline guaranteed the stability necessary for industrial growth. Thefts, frauds, and embezzlements were severely punished, and each production was inventoried, stamped, and stored according to administrative protocols. These warehouses were under the supervision of officials loyal to the king. The centralization of these efforts, combined with the agricultural advances brought by the Zhengguo Canal, reinforced Qin's military power. All these efforts contributed to Qin's image as the most disciplined and efficient state in ancient China. Historical accounts depict a society where everyone, from the farmer to the soldier, knew their role precisely. At the head of this system, Ying Zheng, now an adult and shaped by family betrayal and rigor, consolidated his power by surrounding himself with specialized officials. Between 247 and 230, before Christ, he understood that only swift and firm repression contained the court's intrigues. He surrounded himself with advisors from various backgrounds, loyal to the laws of legalism. Economically, the increase in agricultural yields and the development of metallurgy brought prosperity to Qin. The surpluses fed the workers of the canal and the roads connecting Shenyang to other regions. Although the road network was not yet unified, the centralization effort required connecting each region to the decision-making center. The peasants' requisition for chores and other workers participated in this new structuring, supported by the king. However, unrest persisted. Some nobles, destabilized by the loss of their privileges, sought alliances with other states to escape Ying Zheng's control. But the rigor of governance and the effectiveness of the informer network prevented any major rebellion. The severe punishments inflicted on Lao Ai's supporters served as warnings to any resistance. Gradually, the idea that Qin would no longer weaken, neither internally nor in the face of external pressures, took hold. The period from 247 to 230, before Christ, is marked by actions aimed at strengthening royal authority and rationalizing resource management. Initially, Ying Zheng was surrounded by regents and advisors, his young age not allowing him to sit constantly. But, as he grew, he imposed himself as the sole master on board. The episode of Lao Ai had already shown his determination and ability to use severity. Upon reaching adulthood, he created a standardized state, applying the principles of legalism and promoting young talents at the expense of hereditary hierarchies. Each district sent reports to the capital: border controls, harvests, number of horses, inventory of warehouses. Everything had to reach the central administration, where Ying Zheng and his circle decided to assign troops or inject funds. A model of centralized government was taking shape, which would unfold in the territories conquered later. This rise of the state would not have been possible without the combination of legalism and major infrastructures, such as the Zhengguo Canal. As the harvests increased, the population gradually expanded its field of activity. Many workers left their fields to work in the forges or on fortification sites. These expanded labor pools offered Qin much more than mere mobilizable peasants. They constituted the basis of an economic and military force capable of withstanding political upheavals. At the end of these 17 years, 247 to 230 before Christ, the record of Ying Zheng on the internal consolidation of Qin is impressive. Thanks to the scarcity of centers of dissidence, a loyal administration, and the adoption of a law equal for all, the king developed a solid state apparatus. The Lao Ai affair ended in the sovereign's victory, who took advantage of it to strengthen his authority. The massive investment in the cadaster system and agricultural development had not been in vain. The rise in resources now allowed for more ambitious expansion. Arsenals, established everywhere, ensured a constant flow of weapons, essential for the future. This period, often neglected in traditional accounts, was actually decisive. Without internal security and the vigorous military economic reform, the subsequent history of Qin could never have unfolded the same way. During these years, Ying Zheng established himself as a visionary strategist, not only in military terms, but also in organizing an efficient bureaucracy. This combination of state organization and popular support, enlistment, corvées, taxes, under the direction of a ruthless sovereign, transformed Qin into a centralized model. The principles of meritocracy and uniform law created the foundations of power that nothing seemed able to hinder. In 230, before Christ, Ying Zheng rules a powerfully structured kingdom, largely free from internal turmoil. Family intrigues and the lack of specialized labor are now things of the past. Qin now embodies legal and administrative efficiency, ready to take a decisive step. For the international public, often familiar with images of the Great Wall or the Terracotta Army, it is important to understand that between 247 and 230, before Christ, a political, logistical, and social edifice was patiently erected. Without this phase, the subsequent history of Ying Zheng, future August Emperor, would probably never have reached the scale known today. In these years of internal consolidation, the seeds of the radical transformation of ancient China are already present, starting with a state ready to project its power beyond its borders. At the turn of the 3rd century before Christ, China was divided among several kingdoms inherited from the Warring States period, each seeking to dominate the others. Among these powers, Qin, to the west, had become the most well-organized state militarily and administratively. Under Ying Zheng, king of Qin, the ambition to unify China was clarified. The goal was clear: to conquer the 6 other major kingdoms, Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi, to create a unified empire. Despite strong resistance, Qin had considerable resources and a modernized army, which allowed it to prevail over kingdoms weakened by internal struggles and poor coordination. In 230 before Christ, Qin attacked Han, a small strategic kingdom that served as a corridor to the east, opening the way to Zhao and Wei. After months of military maneuvers, the Qin army penetrated Han, whose defenses were weakened by internal conflicts. The capital fell quickly, and Ying Zheng annexed the kingdom, securing direct access to the Central Plains. The following year, Qin turned to Zhao. This kingdom, once powerful, was divided by internal struggles, making its resistance vulnerable. Qin's armies quickly crossed the borders and reached the capital, Handan, which the Qin troops took after a fierce battle. Once the city fell, Qin annihilated the local nobility to prevent any future rebellion. A symbolic bow, found in the abandoned palace of the capital, became a trophy marking the definitive fall of Zhao. In 228, before Christ, Zhao fell under Qin's control, and Ying Zheng consolidated his power by placing loyal administrators and imposing Qin's laws. After the fall of Zhao, Qin turns to Wei, a kingdom in the lower Yellow River Valley. Although less powerful than before, Wei still represents a strategic obstacle for the unification of Qin. In 225, before Christ, the Qin army besieges Daliang, the capital of Wei, with its strong walls. To hasten the surrender, the Qin generals decide to divert the Yellow River to flood the city and its surroundings, blocking supplies and spreading panic. The Qin engineers, experts in hydraulics, implement the plan, submerging part of Daliang and forcing the population to surrender. This maneuver illustrates the brutality and tactical ingenuity of Qin, combining military strength and large-scale strategies. With the fall of Wei, Ying Zheng's grip on the east strengthens, consolidating his confidence in the unification of China. Despite previous victories, Qin still has to face Chu, a powerful kingdom in the southeast. In 224 before Christ, Ying Zheng mobilizes a large army for a decisive offensive. At Zhulu, the Qin forces confront those of Chu, led by General Xiang Yan, known for his courage. Despite Xiang Yan's attempts to repel Qin's numerical and strategic superiority triumphs. During the duel, Xiang Yan dies, demoralizing his troops. In 223, before Christ, Chu is pacified, significantly increasing the territory under Qin's control and bringing unification closer. After the fall of Chu, Qin turns to Yan, a kingdom in the northeast. It is from Yan that the famous assassination attempt on Ying Zheng by Jing Ke was launched in 227 before Christ, a significant event that strengthened Qin's determination. In 222 before Christ, Qin launches an offensive against Yan. Despite some skirmishes, Yan's resistance is quickly crushed. General Wang Jian, strong from his previous victories, is tasked with leading the attack. After the fall of Yan, Qin prepares to attack the last remaining kingdom, Qi. At the dawn of 221, before Christ, Qi is the last independent kingdom. Once powerful, it finds itself isolated after the conquest of neighboring kingdoms by Qin. The king of Qi, deprived of alliances, hesitates to resist against the feared Qin army, renowned for its engineers, capable of diverting rivers and building roads at high speed. Generals like Wang Jian and Wang Ben head towards Qi, and Qin advances gradually, securing routes without direct battles. The surrender of Qi occurs without a major battle. The king, to save his people, prefers to capitulate rather than face a massacre. Ying Zheng seizes the opportunity to peacefully unify China, thus ending his military campaigns. In 221 before Christ, the Warring States period ends. Qin dominates the entire territory, and Ying Zheng declares himself emperor. It is a major turning point. For the first time, a ruler controls lands extending from Gansu to the Eastern Sea, and from the Yellow River to the Yangtze. This unification, achieved through force and a series of strategic maneuvers, establishes a centralized empire. Contemporaries measure the significance of this accomplishment. Some praise Ying Zheng's determination, capable of overcoming military and diplomatic obstacles. Others highlight the bloodshed and suffering caused by these wars. But with the fall of Qi, the idea of a unified China becomes reality. Ying Zheng lays the foundations of this empire, with political and administrative reforms that will mark the region's history. Between 230 and 221, before Christ, the unification campaigns seal the fate of the kingdoms of Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, and Qi. The military and technological advancements, allied with Qin's determination, have extended Ying Zheng's authority over all of China. This brutal and efficient process lays the groundwork for an imperial organization that will influence subsequent dynasties. The unification, the zenith of Qin's power, marks the beginning of a new governance whose influence will persist. In 221 before Christ, the kingdom of Qin, after years of wars, has become the sole dominant power in China. Its ruler, Ying Zheng, has defeated all his neighbors of the warring states and declares himself Huangdi, an unprecedented title. This term, meaning both August and emperor, had never been used to designate a Chinese monarch. This appellation marks his desire to distinguish himself from past kings and present himself as a unique sovereign, superior to any traditional hierarchy. He thus merges the traditions of the three sovereigns and the five emperors, mythical figures of ancient China, to claim a quasi-cosmic role in the country's history. This act is not merely symbolic. It has major political and cultural repercussions. As emperor, Qin Shi Huang positions himself as the legitimate heir of the celestial civilization. He is seen as the sole ruler of the country, placed under the aegis of superior forces. This legitimization supports large-scale reforms aimed at ensuring the continuity of his empire. Unifying the territory is not enough. He must now strengthen the administrative structures and establish a unified ideological foundation to prevent dissidence. It is in this context that he implements the centralization of power and initiates reforms aimed at standardizing his entire empire. One of Qin Shi Huang's first measures is the abolition of the feudal system. Previously, the kingdoms were divided into hereditary fiefs, governed by members of the royal family. This system, which favored fragmentation and rivalries, is abandoned in favor of a centralized state. The territory is divided into 36 commanderies, jian, each led by a civil and military prefect appointed by the emperor. These commanderies are subdivided into districts, themselves administered by officials often chosen for their merit rather than their aristocratic lineage. This reorganization aims to centralize all decisions under imperial authority and prevent the emergence of local potentates. In parallel, Qin Shi Huang launches an unprecedented unification reform. The warring states each had their own standards of weights and measures, complicating commercial exchanges and transportation. The emperor establishes a uniform system of weights and measures, as well as a standardization of cart axles to ensure smooth travel on roads. This reinforces the idea of a coherent and unified empire, under the watchful eye of the Qin throne. Another important reform is the introduction of a standardized currency. Qin Shi Huang imposes a round coin with a central hole, inspired by those of the Qin kingdom. This currency replaces the diversity of coins used in other states. In addition to facilitating exchanges, it symbolizes imperial authority and serves as a reminder with each transaction of the centralization of power. Writing, which until then had varied from one state to another, is also standardized. Li Si, the minister renowned for his rigor, is tasked with creating a unified script. The small seal, Xiaozhuan, derived from the script used by Qin, becomes the official style. This new form of writing is imposed on official documents and ensures administrative uniformity. It thus avoids any confusion linked to differences in characters and strengthens the authority of the central government by ensuring clear and uniform communication throughout the empire. To consolidate his power and shape minds, Qin Shi Huang takes a controversial step: censorship and the control of knowledge. Convinced that the unity of the state depends on obedience to the law, FA, and the authority of the sovereign, the legalist advisors prohibited any criticism and teachings of philosophies likely to fuel dissent. The state, according to them, had to impose a common vision to the detriment of philosophical debates. Thus occurred the book burnings of Confucian works and other texts deemed useless or subversive. Books that did not directly serve administration, dynastic history, or agricultural practices were seen as dangerous, capable of sparking independent thoughts and challenging the established order. Historians like Sima Qian describe the violence of these destructions. Hundreds of books were burned, leading to a major cultural loss. In some cities, bonfires were erected to eliminate any written trace contrary to the official line. Scholars opposed to this censorship, often from Confucian, Mohist, or Daoist schools, tried to save texts by hiding them or memorizing them for oral transmission. However, the emperor and his advisors considered this censorship essential to reinforce the new order. They believed that the unity of the state could only be maintained by erasing the roots of ideological dissent. Another controversial fact is the burial of certain scholars, sometimes described as a collective live burial. According to legend, several hundred scholars were executed or buried for refusing to renounce their doctrines or for criticizing the emperor. Other theories mention political opponents or alleged sorcerers as targets. Whatever the reality, this repression, combined with the destruction of books, is seen as a symbol of the rigidity of the Qin regime and the death of freedom of thought. These draconian measures, however, achieved their intended goal, strengthening the emperor's authority by reducing critical voices. During the early years of the unified empire, 221-214 before Christ, thanks to the abolition of fiefdoms, the appointment of prefects by the throne, the establishment of an official script, and the standardization of currency, Ying Zheng consolidated his grip on all aspects of economic, administrative, and cultural life. He positioned himself not only as the victor of wars, but also as the architect of a unified social order, strictly controlled and oriented towards the grandeur of the Qin Empire. This vast reform program, which might seem brutal to a modern observer, must be placed in the context of the era. To Qin Shi Huang and his advisors, dissolving regional identities, which had fueled centuries of conflicts, was essential. They sought to create a homogeneous China, unified under a single authority. The coexistence of old systems of weights, units of measurement, and divergent moral principles risked reopening still fresh wounds. To avoid this risk, it was necessary to impose the population's submission to these new rules, including through the repression of intellectual opponents. Although these reforms were authoritarian, they mark a major turning point. They lay the foundations of centralized governance, which would persist under subsequent dynasties. They also foreshadow a complex bureaucratic state, where officials play a key role in managing public affairs. The standardization of writing, in the form of the small seal, is a major cultural milestone that will facilitate the adoption of other scripts under the Han, contributing to the preservation and dissemination of Chinese heritage. Similarly, the unification of roads and measures will be essential for troop transport, goods movement, and infrastructure construction. Between 221 and 214, before Christ, the Qin Empire becomes an increasingly integrated space, where the imperial power's grip and the vision of a society rid of the diversity of former kingdoms are apparent. Markets now use the same currency, grains are weighed with identical scales, and carts circulate unhindered. The title of Huangdi resonates in ceremonies, embodying a new and feared authority. Qin Shi Huang thus presents himself as the creator of a new order, meant to ensure peace and prosperity under his law. However, this peace is built on a foundation of coercion, censorship, executions, and constant surveillance. The emperor, anxious to secure his legacy and reduce any opposition, resorts to extreme measures to extinguish potential rebellions. Censorship targets books and thinkers, perceived as carriers of subversive ideas. Yet, despite criticisms, the partial success of his centralization enterprise is undeniable. In the medium term, his administrative system will shape the structure of imperial China and leave a lasting legacy. In 214, before Christ, after several years of reforms, Qin Shi Huang manages a coherent but fragile administrative edifice due to its oppressive nature. Advisors monitor the slightest signs of rebellion, while the people are subjected to corvées, taxes, and military obligations. In the sovereign's eyes, these sacrifices are necessary to strengthen a young empire born from 2 centuries of incessant struggles between kingdoms. However, the future will show the difficulties of maintaining such a regime without the genuine adherence of the population. Between 221 and 214, before Christ, the imperial reforms of Qin Shi Huang changed the face of China. The 36 commanderies form a dense administrative network. Currency, weights, measures, and writing are now homogeneous. Censorship and control of knowledge reduce diversity of opinion. The imperial title was born, and the idea of a unified empire became an institutional reality. A new chapter of Chinese history was written, inscribed in this small seal that everyone must now know. These reforms, of unparalleled scope, combine a desire for stability with often harsh methods, but they mark a key moment in China's history and its collective imagination, as one of the earliest examples of large-scale centralization and rapid transformation of a divided world. At the time when Emperor Qin Shi Huang, formerly Ying Zheng, completes the unification of vast territories, he launches several monumental projects to assert his authority. Among them are the construction of the first sections of the Great Wall, interconnected palaces, including the famous Epang Palace, and a mausoleum at Lishan, which became famous for its terracotta army. These achievements, reflecting the 3rd century before Christ, are unprecedented in scale, both in concept and symbolic scope. The beginnings of the Great Wall, Wanli Changcheng, started after the unification of China. The former kingdoms had already erected walls to protect against nomadic raids. Once his power was consolidated, Qin Shi Huang decided to unify and extend these fortifications into a single continuous wall, symbolizing his might. The works required the mobilization of hundreds of thousands of conscripted peasants who, removed from their fields, worked in difficult conditions. Construction techniques included ramming, compacting earth between planks, and using bricks or stones depending on available resources. Each section followed the terrain, integrating forts and watchtowers to transmit signals. This endeavor goes beyond military defense. It also serves to control border populations and visually affirm the emperor's power. The logistics required to transport materials, water, and food are complex, and the harshness of the construction deeply marks the collective memory, illustrated by legends such as that of Lady Meng Jiang, weeping for her husband on the wall. Concurrently with the architectural offensive in the north, Qin Shi Huang launches a vast urban project in Xianyang, the imperial capital located on the north bank of the Wei River. Already important under previous Qin rulers, the city becomes the heart of the empire, a place where roads converge, administration unfolds, and imperial authority radiates. A reconstruction program of the ramparts reinforces the military strength of the capital, with new monumental gates and a reorganization of the road network to structure the urban space. The greatest symbol of imperial majesty is the Epang Palace. Construction began in the early years of the unified reign. Although its name may be linked to a geographic location, it is primarily known for its outsized proportions, encompassing the most grandiose architecture of the time. The palace was to host the emperor, his concubines, and his court in absolute opulence, with gardens, audience halls, galleries, and buildings for official ceremonies. Sources report that the palace was meant to reflect the divine status of Qin Shi Huang, the Son of Heaven. Renowned architects oversaw the construction, assisted by stonecutters, carpenters, and decorators, using high-quality materials. Decorations in lacquer, silk, and bronze heightened the spectacular aspect of the site. Long corridors allowed the emperor and his entourage to move without leaving the palace compound. The outdoor spaces, with artificial waters and groves, provided relaxation spots for the court, creating a labyrinthine complex where the sovereign could display himself or hide at will. Uncertainties remain about the completion of the palace, with some estimating that only a portion was built before Qin Shi Huang's death, while others speak of the complex's destruction after civil wars. Nevertheless, this project clearly demonstrates the imperial will to centralize the court and administration, reflecting total domination under a single figure at the head of the empire. The Mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, located at Lishan near Xi'an in Shanxi, is one of the most impressive projects undertaken by this emperor. From the time he took the throne of the state of Qin, he reportedly ordered the preparations for his burial site. Over time, the construction grew considerably, involving hundreds of thousands of men. A vast pit was dug, its walls reinforced with earth, pebbles, and bricks, and arranged to depict a miniature world: palaces, mountains, rivers, and a ceiling adorned with pearls and precious stones, symbolizing the celestial vault. The aim of Qin Shi Huang was to recreate an underground miniature empire to continue his rule after death, supported by beliefs in immortality and mastery of destiny. This project involved complex techniques to reproduce every element of the real world. Among the unique features of the mausoleum was a network of mercury rivers, representing the main Chinese rivers, intended to flow eternally around the burial chamber. Recent discoveries confirm high levels of mercury around the tumulus, supporting this hypothesis. The most famous aspect of the mausoleum remains the Terracotta army, discovered in 1974 by farmers. This Terracotta army, composed of thousands of soldiers, horses, chariots, and officers, is impressive. Each figure is unique, with distinct faces and hairstyles indicating rank. Traces of paint reveal that these statues were once colored, demonstrating the artistic expertise and the extent of the workforce available for the project. The layout of the pits shows great knowledge of the art of war. There are infantry formations, chariot attachments, and vanguard elements. The uniforms and weapons reveal the hierarchical organization of the Qin army. Although many weapons have disappeared or oxidized, some arrowheads, swords, and spears have been found in good condition, thanks to preservation techniques still being studied. This statuary army was meant to protect the deceased sovereign and symbolize in the underground world the military invincibility he claimed in his lifetime. As excavations continue, researchers realize the sophistication of the burial construction. The rammed earth structure where the soldiers are located is designed to support a wooden ceiling covered with earth, forming a giant hippogem. The arrangement in parallel corridors separated by earthen partitions evokes streets filled with troops in battle order. This organization reflects the importance given by the state of Qin to laws, ranks, and military efficiency, values dear to the emperor. Symbolically, the project, the Great Wall, the Epang Palace, and the Lishan Mausoleum embodies the will to control space, dominate time, and extend imperial influence after death. The fortifications of the north symbolize the protection of the territory, while the urban projects in Xianyang and the Epang Palace illustrate the grandeur of imperial power. The mausoleum bears witness to a quest for eternity, pushing the limits of earthly reality. These monuments remain lasting testimonies of the power of Qin Shi Huang, still fascinating visitors today. By limiting the analysis to this period, one better understands how the first emperor of the Qin Dynasty transformed his kingdom into an imperial empire, supported by monumental constructions. These sites, despite the legends surrounding them, remain masterpieces of engineering, architecture, and centralization. The thousands of workers and the resources deployed aimed at making visible a centralized and uniform empire where the emperor's will surpassed the forces of time and nature. These great constructions thus reflect a political and ideological project that has durably marked the collective imagination of China and the world. Under the reign of Qin Shi Huang, personal name Ying Zheng, immortality became an essential quest. In ancient Chinese culture, myths and legends evoked immortals. The Xian, living on distant islands such as Penglai, reputed for their medicinal plants and elixirs. This mysterious quest was led by the imperial envoy, Xu Fu. At the end of the 3rd century before Christ, the search for immortality became more pressing for Qin Shi Huang, strengthening his power. Influenced by astrologers and Taoist beliefs, he sought clues about the existence of these legendary lands. He saw in this quest a form of salvation in the face of the fragility of human existence after having faced numerous conspiracies. On his orders, Xu Fu, a doctor and alchemist, was tasked with an expedition to the east to find Penglai, Fangjiang, and Yingzhou. The goal was to bring back the elixir of life. The mission was a great honor and a sacred duty, aimed at proving that imperial glory extended beyond earthly borders. However, within the court, some doubted the real existence of these islands, having found no concrete evidence. Others believed in the truth of the legends. Convinced that the impossible had to be attempted, Qin Shi Huang allocated vast resources to Xu Fu, who set out with a large crew, ships, and supplies for several months. He also brought along mages and ritual practitioners to appease the marine deities. When the expedition left the shores in 219 before Christ, the imperial entourage was hopeful for an imminent discovery of the island of Penglai, fueled by favorable astrological omens. The first months of navigation were marked by storms, unknown currents, and sea monsters, enhancing the mystical aura of the mission. However, despite the colossal investment, Xu Fu did not return with any elixir. Sources suggest that the expedition might not have found the islands and had to turn back, mentioning a great fish or a sea demon as an obstacle. Upon his return, Xu Fu found himself in a delicate position facing the emperor. He explained that the expedition needed to be postponed, with more warriors and techniques to deal with the creatures. Some historians think it was a ruse to avoid execution. Whatever the case, Qin Shi Huang, frustrated but still hopeful, promised reinforcements for a second expedition. This quest for immortality was not limited to Penglai. The emperor was also interested in alchemical arts, influenced by the Taoism of the time. Court alchemists sought to create potions that would purify the body and make it immune to aging. The most famous was the one made with cinnabar, a mercury sulfide. This substance, when heated, transformed into pure mercury, a liquid metal. The idea was that ingesting cinnabar purified the body and delayed death. But in reality, mercury and its compounds are toxic, and these potions slowly poisoned their consumers. Accounts report that repeated ingestion of cinnabar caused symptoms of poisoning and sometimes bouts of madness. The paradox of this supposedly salvific poison stemmed from ignorance of toxicological principles. It was not yet known that the accumulation of mercury in the body was fatal in the long term. For Qin Shi Huang, the belief in the effectiveness of cinnabar was such that he regularly solicited his specialists to refine the formula. Some texts compiled after the fall of the Qin Dynasty mention episodes of delirium, behavioral changes, and extreme mood swings, retrospectively attributed to slow poisoning. Propaganda of the time, however, concealed these details, insisting on the infallibility of the emperor and his alchemy advisors. Superstitions and the influence of astrologers also weighed on the sovereign and the administration. In ancient Chinese thought, heaven, Tian, and earth, Di, were governed by cosmic cycles. Every natural phenomenon, whether an eclipse, a comet, or the movement of stars, was perceived as a sign sent to rulers. Emperors, invested with the heavenly mandate, had to understand and interpret these omens to maintain cosmic harmony. Zhou Yan, an astrologer of the time, is said to have explained to Qin Shi Huang the theory of the five elements: water, fire, wood, metal, earth, and their impact on the dynasty. According to this theory, each dynasty corresponded to a dominant element, and any change in the natural order, like a shift in constellations or an earthquake, was interpreted as a warning from heaven. The imperial court therefore rigorously checked rituals, modified official practices, or adopted measures to appease invisible forces and ensure divine blessing. The influence of astrologers also extended to the management of the calendar. It was not just a tool for measuring time, but a component of the cosmic order. Dates for major works, ceremonies, and military expeditions were carefully chosen. Certain days, deemed inauspicious, were forbidden for major actions, as starting an enterprise out of sync reduced the chances of success and attracted the wrath of the heavens. The calendar prohibitions were particularly monitored under Qin Shi Huang, especially since his quest for immortality reinforced his desire to respect higher forces. Astrologers studied constellations and celestial phenomena to determine auspicious times for longevity elixirs, ritual sacrifices, or expeditions to find Penglai. On certain nights deemed auspicious, scholars, doctors, and magicians would gather around the emperor for esoteric ceremonies. They chanted secret texts, burned incense, and made offerings to implore the mercy of heaven and call upon benevolent spirits to guide Shu Fu or other visitors from unknown lands. Despite the lack of tangible results, Qin Shi Huang remained convinced of the need to persist. If Penglai was not accessible during the first expedition, it might be at another time. To explain the ineffectiveness of potions or the lack of success of the expeditions, some courtiers suggested that the emperor had not performed all the necessary rites or had not yet formed a complete alliance with marine spirits. Others insisted that he had to purify his heart and mind to be worthy of the immortals. These discussions, between superstition and flattery, fueled hope despite the failures. Over time, the emperor's alchemical quest weighed on his entourage. Many feared that this obsession might compromise the state's stability and discredit the emperor in the eyes of the people if these expenditures were revealed. Archives also mention rumors that Qin Shi Huang had secretly prepared other means to achieve immortality, such as artificial mountains or elaborate funeral rituals. This paranoia associated with death confirmed the importance of his quest for immortality. If a second maritime expedition led by Shu Fu took place, it likely met the same fate as the first. No concrete evidence confirmed the discovery of the magical islands. According to a Japanese legend, Shu Fu sailed to Japan, where he settled, founding a community and remaining cut off from the imperial court. This version, difficult to verify, demonstrates the continuing fascination with this episode, an emperor sending a fleet to pursue a myth. Until the end of his reign, Qin Shi Huang continued to take cinnabar pills, convinced that alchemy concealed an unknown secret. The court alchemists, under pressure, combined various ingredients like gold, jade, minerals, and rare plants. But mercury remained the key element. Ignorant of its toxic effects, they attributed failures to poor execution, bad calendar timing, or evil spirits. Gradually, the Chinese scientific and medical sphere made some advances, but the influence of the first emperor prevented any public questioning of mercurial potions. As long as he believed in them, scholars could only conceal their doubts. The imperial court, governed by etiquette, generally did not allow contradicting the emperor. The rare critiques, often relegated to ancient texts, suggest that unease existed, but responding to it risked punishments. Thus, political prudence prevailed. It was better to invoke new arguments or the complexity of rites than to openly deny the efficacy of the elixirs. The search for Penglai Islands and experimentation with cinnabar pills well illustrate the blend of beliefs, ambitions, and technical knowledge of this period. The imperial court included competent astronomers, hydraulics experts, and metallurgy artisans. However, the emperor and his advisors, influenced by ideological reasons, embarked on the pursuit of an apparently inaccessible myth. Divinatory practices, notably those of Zhou Yan, mixed politics and cosmology, prompting Qin Shi Huang to believe that aligning his actions with cosmic forces would make him invincible against death. The world of the first emperor was built around rational skills, hierarchical administration, standardization, but also supernatural concepts, quest for immortality, reading the stars, fear of demons. For him, there was no contradiction between these aspects. Technical progress and magical rituals complemented each other. Astrologers were both scholars and exorcists. Ultimately, the emperor found neither at sea nor in his laboratories the key to immortality. However, his relentless quest to escape destiny and the wear of time has left a mark on Chinese history. It illustrates the belief that with enough determination, humans could break natural limits. Accounts of his reign are mixed. Some emphasize his errors and paranoia, while others see him as an ambitious ruler in a world where the marvelous was part of reality. The enduring quest for immortality between exploration, alchemy, and superstitions remains one of the most striking facets of his reign. In the latter half of Qin Shi Huang's reign, the emperor seemed all-powerful after unifying the warring states, centralizing the administration, and developing vast infrastructures. However, an atmosphere of tension and fear prevailed. Plots against him, ominous omens, and rumors of violent repression of Confucian scholars revealed the fragility of a regime obsessed with the survival of its successors. The failed assassination attempt by Zhang Liang is a striking example. Coming from an influential family of the Han Kingdom, Zhang Liang harbored deep resentment towards Qin Shi Huang, responsible for the fall of the Han Dynasty. He attempted to kill the emperor with a mace suspended over the imperial road. Although sources differ on the details, the operation failed, and Zhang Liang managed to escape, joining a clandestine network of aristocrats and scholars hostile to the regime. This failure confirmed for Qin Shi Huang a latent danger, and he reinforced his security measures. Since the assassination attempt by Jing Ke, when he was still the king of Qin, the emperor knew that unification did not guarantee internal peace. he instituted strict controls, severely punishing any suspect. But human plots were not his only concern. Celestial signs, such as comets or earthquakes, were considered divine warnings. Under his reign, several earthquakes and comet appearances occurred. Some astrologers reassured the emperor, while others spread rumors of a possible diversion of the celestial mandate due to his excessive rigor and divine pretensions. Immediately, Qin Shi Huang organized incognito inspection tours, sometimes with all imperial pomp, sometimes disguised, accompanied by a small group of loyalists. The official goal was to check ongoing projects, listen to the people's grievances, and impose direct control. But it was also to identify hotbeds of sedition. In markets and inns, he listened discreetly to rumors. At the slightest subversive word or hint of a plot, the guard intervened. This system, while allowing for surprising certain discussions, fueled distrust. The fear of betrayal was omnipresent, and criticisms were harshly repressed, whether they came from peasants or scholars opposed to the reforms. One story particularly fueled the fears, that of the scholars buried alive. Around 213, before Christ, Qin Shi Huang supposedly punished Confucian scholars for criticizing his policy, some being executed or buried alive. Although modern historians temper these facts, the episode reinforced the image of a tyrannical emperor. For the people, these executions, or summary trials, signaled an absolute intolerance of opposition, and some whispered that the spirits of the scholars demanded revenge. It was said that natural disasters and astral anomalies were signs of the ancestors' wrath. Fear also extended into the entourage of Qin Shi Huang. In Shenyang, everything was monitored: letters, conversations, movements. Close collaborators such as Chancellor Li Si, and the eunuch Zhao Gao, closely watched individuals and managed a network of informers. The sovereign, always on alert, consulted magicians and diviners to seek remedies and elixirs of immortality. His quarters were protected by an unprecedented security device, as he also feared betrayal within his own circle. Officials knew that a misstep could lead to sudden disgrace. Qin Shi Huang's paranoia sometimes resulted in a witch hunt. Disgraced high officials disappeared into the anonymity of a prison or committed suicide to avoid dishonor. It was said that the emperor used poisons to secretly eliminate his opponents. Court physicians, supposed to prolong the sovereign's life, risked their own lives in case of illness. Any health failure of the emperor was interpreted as a sign of a conspiracy or a divine warning. Zheng Liang's attempt testified to the persistent resistance against Qin Shi Huang despite the measures deployed. Internal divisions were growing. Some advocated for more tolerance to calm heaven's wrath, while others recommended reinforcing repression to crush any opposition. Over time, each omen reinforced the emperor's belief that fate was closing in on him. A comet or an earthquake was immediately interpreted as a bad omen. Qin Shi Huang, far from calming the situation, sought to stifle any discordant voice, which only fueled rumors. The fear of vengeance from buried scholars created a myth around the intellectual repression. Simple earthquakes were attributed to the spirits of these victims, ready to shake the empire to punish the emperor. Every day brought its share of worrying news: inexplicable deaths, disappearances, denunciations of conspiracies. Zheng Liang was just one of many enemies of the throne, and the emperor, obsessed with secrecy, ended up fearing even his own shadow. The state of suspicion even affected the military organization. Generals, once glorified, were now monitored by inspectors and infiltrated spies. The fear of being accused of negligence or hidden ambition plagued the court. This atmosphere would undermine the stability of the empire after the death of Qin Shi Huang. The emperor, between blind trust and extreme fear, left behind a paranoid state apparatus, prone to rivalries and lacking the broad popular support of previous rulers. The failure of Zhang Liang's assassination attempt reinforced security measures and censorship while intensifying the prosecution of dissidents. Celestial omens continued to threaten a withdrawal of the celestial mandate from a ruler deemed too intransigent. Rumors of curses surrounding the executed scholars permeated the collective psyche, and the emperor, obsessed with his survival and quest for immortality, fueled fear. To maintain his authority, he stifled any dissent, driving conspirators to action. Violence begot violence, threatening even the most feared thrones. The paranoia of Qin Shi Huang and the fear of cosmic punishment undermined the Qin Dynasty's power from within. The memory of Zhang Liang, of cometary and seismic omens, testified to an empire in permanent tension. The obsession with controlling public life fueled popular resentment and the distrust of the nobility. The example of the first emperor of China shows that even a centralized power can collapse under the accumulation of fears, whether superstitious, political, or personal. This atmosphere of conspiracies and omens foreshadowed the uprisings that followed Qin Shi Huang's death, when the Qin dynasty would collapse in a few years. In 214, before Christ, the Qin Empire, led by Qin Shi Huang, extends widely, and his reign, marked by his boundless ambition, approaches its end. The emperor, still young and full of projects, seeks to consolidate his power in the south, in the regions of Lingnan, today's Guangdong and Guangxi, and Minyue, current Fujian. For years, troops and engineers have been sent to integrate these territories into the new empire, exploiting their natural resources, securing the borders, and spreading imperial law. This expansion project compares to other conquests of antiquity, but for Qin, it represents a major advancement. To connect the capital Xianyang to the southern territories, Qin establishes an impressive road network, facilitating the passage of armies and merchants, while consolidating his authority over the empire's outskirts. This road network embodies a technical feat. It ensures the rapid delivery of orders, taxes, and supplies, with carts and military wagons traveling on corridors of gravel and packed earth, crossing hills with ramps. For the local populations, these works may seem brutal, but the objective is clear: to unify the border areas, control the passes, and develop trade exchanges. Qin Shi Huang, already a shrewd strategist, bets on these projects to affirm the power of his empire. Imperial officials in Lingnan and Minyu census the populations, organize land distribution, and impose the cultivation of cereals to support the military effort. Gradually, these independent regions integrate into the imperial administration. However, behind this facade of conquest, Qin Shi Huang harbors other ambitions. Since his youth, he dreams of immortality. Despite the advice of his close associates, he relentlessly continues his imperial tours, covering long distances to inspect the sites and ensure the loyalty of the commanders. Each journey is meticulously organized, with military escorts, caravans of horses, and provisions. The emperor seems never to know rest, always on the move to guarantee the stability of his empire and seek the elixir of long life that some alchemists promise him. At the beginning of the year 210, Before Christ, Qin Shi Huang is already in his 50s, a notable age for the time. He continues to harbor the will to control all the territories of his vast empire. Among his advisors, Li Si, the chancellor, and Zhao Gao, a high-ranking eunuch official, exert increasing influence. Li Si is pragmatic and a fervent advocate for legal reforms, while Zhao Gao stands out for his mastery of court intrigues and his ambiguous loyalty. Succession becomes a thorny issue, especially since the official heir, Prince Fusu, opposes his father's severe methods. In the summer of 210, before Christ, Qin Shi Huang undertakes an inspection journey across the empire. However, during this trip, he falls seriously ill, possibly due to exhaustion and the cinnabar elixirs he consumed to prolong his life. The doctors are unable to save him, and the emperor dies near Shakyu in August 210. Before Christ, Qin Shi Huang's death plunges the dynasty into uncertainty, lacking a clear succession plan. The emperor's death is immediately concealed. Li Si and Zhao Gao fear revolts or a premature power struggle. The emperor's body is secretly transported to the capital, hidden under provisions. For several weeks, only a few high-ranking officials are informed. This staging illustrates the powerful's fear of potential challenges. Li Si and Zhao Gao then turn to the imperial testament. Although Fusu is the legitimate heir, his moderate temperament worries them. They fear that his accession to power would weaken their own influence. The two men forge a false testament, claiming that Qin Shi Huang had revoked Fusu and designated his other son, Hu Hai, as successor, a choice easier to manipulate. The false will of Qin Shi Huang claims that he had discovered the weakness of Fusu, deemed unworthy to continue his policy, and advised him to commit suicide to atone for his disobedience. The emperor would then have designated Hu Hai as the sovereign under the name Qin Shi. This stratagem relies on the idea that no one in the emperor's entourage would contest his will. Li Si, a respected chancellor, and Zhao Gao, an influential eunuch, bet on the general fear of betrayal. Their word exerts an influence over the imperial entourage, which, in a climate of panic, agrees to recognize Qin Shi, fearful of any accusation of treason. Hu Hai, although ignorant and manipulable, ascends to the throne without a solid power base, dependent on Li Si and Zhao Gao. The stratagem works, and the dignitaries do not contest it, seeking to avoid the purge. Contesting the imperial choice would equate to risking death and the extinction of one's family. Meanwhile, Fusu, stationed at the empire's borders, hesitates before committing suicide, unable to ignore the decree's validity. His death eliminates the primary threat to the throne. Li Si and Zhao Gao's plan succeeds. Qin Shi reigns without direct opposition within the imperial family, and the disappearance of the legitimate heir marks a disguised coup, prefiguring the political fragility of the following years. Between the death of Qin Shi Huang and the proclamation of Qin Shi, the dynasty's future quickly shifts. The empire, already weakened by forced labor, repressive decrees, and unification campaigns, loses its sovereign, who, despite his authoritarianism, was the regime's pillar. Li Si and Zhao Gao attempt to maintain the legacy by installing a docile emperor, but without legitimate succession and without Qin Shi Huang's aura, the empire wavers. Distrust grows at court, and a rumor spreads. The new master's legitimacy is uncertain. The garrisons and road network are strengthened, but this precarious balance will not last. The official history praises obedience to Qin Shi and the continuity of his father's work. The young emperor's edicts attempt to reassure the local administration to avoid any rebellion. But behind the scenes, The death of Fusu, the presumed heir, creates unease among the imperial family's supporters. The empire's severe legislation still weighs on the people, and many scholars and officials wonder how long this direction, imposed by deception, can last. From 214 to 210. Before Christ, Qin Shi Huang's reign is nearing its end, and the dynasty enters an acute crisis. The empire, now led by an emperor without authority, will collapse under the weight of dissent, paving the way for a revolt that will end the alliance formed under Qin Shi Huang's iron grip. We are in 210 before Christ. The Qin Dynasty, which has unified China for about 15 years, is preparing to face its greatest ordeal. After the death of the founding emperor Qin Shi Huang, internal rivalries erupt. Despite a centralized administration and a revolutionary legal system, tensions and popular pressure intensify. In the months that follow, the enemies of the dynasty take action, and although the court tries to conceal the sovereign's disappearance, the reality quickly emerges. Uprisings break out, showing the regime's fragility. In 209, before Christ, the revolt of Chen Sheng and Wu Guang becomes a decisive turning point. Soldiers in charge of transporting prisoners, they mutiny after a delay caused by bad weather, fearing severe reprisals. They gather supporters and proclaim their rebellion, quickly attracting peasants and the disgruntled. Their goal is simple: to overthrow a power they deem oppressive, due to taxes, forced labor, and military discipline. The Qin regime, led by Qin Shi, attempts to suppress the revolts, but the territory's vastness and the population's hostility make action difficult. Local leaders and former nobles, stripped of their power, join the insurgents. However, the revolts encounter a lack of military experience and a fragile organization. Despite initial victories, the insurgency loses momentum. Two other major figures emerge: Shang Yu, a renowned warrior, and Liu Bang, a savvy politician, who will succeed in rallying significant support. Around 208, before Christ, Shang Yu and Liu Bang, initially linked to the uprisings, began to forge their own paths. Shang Yu, known for his bravery in battle, distinguished himself with swift victories against the Qin forces. Coming from a noble family of Chu, he likely harbored a desire for revenge against the dynasty that destroyed the autonomy of his state. On the other hand, Liu Bang, a former official under the Qin, used his administrative knowledge to rally moderate supporters. While Shang Yu attracted those willing to fight, Liu Bang adopted a more diplomatic approach, seeking alliances with local notables and village leaders. The decisive turning point came in 207, before Christ, during the Battle of Julu. This battle is famous for Shang Yu's courage, as he managed to galvanize his troops and break the morale of the Qin soldiers. According to some accounts, he destroyed his own boats and cooking pots to signify that victory or death were the only outcomes. This imagery remains striking, albeit partly embellished in later chronicles. The Qin forces eventually surrendered, accelerating the collapse of imperial power and triggering massive rebellion across the provinces. In this chaotic context, Ying, the last representative of the Qin, ascended the throne in 207 before Christ, after the elimination of Qin Shi. Attempting to limit the violence, he sought to negotiate an end to the civil war, but his reign, too short, failed in the face of widespread dissent. The exhausted Qin armies, lacking true leaders, were repeatedly defeated. In 206 before Christ, after a series of defeats, the capital fell into the hands of the rebels, and Ying surrendered. The fall of the Qin dynasty was now irreversible. This collapse is often seen as a lesson on the limits of authoritarianism. Although Qin Shi Huang established a coherent state and introduced effective reforms, the brutality of his regime and its lack of moral legitimacy fueled profound discontent. The revolts of Chen Sheng, Wu Guang, Xiang Yu, and Liu Bang would have likely been less impactful if the people had not already suffered from daily oppression. Massive forced labor and excessive centralization pushed the provinces to revolt, hastening the dynasty's fall. This episode is frequently cited to illustrate that no authority can endure if it neglects collective well-being and confuses firmness with the oppression of freedoms. Despite its brevity, the Qin dynasty left lasting legacies. It laid the foundations for a bureaucratic model that would influence subsequent regimes, notably the Han dynasty, which would soon succeed it. Before the Qin, each kingdom adhered to varied norms, making political management and commerce complex. Under the Qin, unified laws and an administrative grid, divided into commanderies and districts, were established under central authority. Although this centralization was rejected after the dynasty's fall, it served as a model for future rulers seeking to consolidate their territories. Another key element was the north-south road axis, which facilitated not only military movements but also commercial exchanges over a vast territory. This infrastructure strengthened the unity of the future China, as did the legal system inherited from the Qin, which, though severe, laid the foundations for a coherent codification. The image of Qin Shi Huang, the central figure of the dynasty, remains paradoxical in Chinese historiography. The historian Sima Qian, a century later under the Han dynasty, painted a harsh portrait, emphasizing Qin Shi Huang's cruelty and paranoia. More recent perspectives highlight his organizational skills and reforms. For some thinkers, he embodies both the architect of territorial unity and the first emperor to proclaim himself as such, inaugurating an imperial era that would mark China for over 2 millennia. However, his authoritarian nature, practices of censorship, and summary executions, along with the rapid fall of the dynasty, tarnish his legacy. His intransigence without the moral support of Confucianism would soon be perceived as a tyrannical deviation. In the 20th century, the Qin dynasty emerged spectacularly from the shadows. Excavations near Xi'an, initiated in the 1970s, uncovered the Mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, notably the Terracotta army. This world-famous discovery includes thousands of life-sized statues intended to protect the emperor in the afterlife. Classified as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the site has become a symbol of the power and ingenuity of the Qin era, attracting visitors from around the globe. However, the main tomb, believed to contain a subterranean recreation of the empire, remains partially unexplored due to Chinese authorities' concerns regarding its preservation. Today, the memory of Qin is both fascinating and controversial, a symbol of unification for some, tyranny for others, with Qin Shi Huang always at the center of the debate. The discoveries of the 20th century allowed the public to rediscover the Qin Empire, whose legacy, though brief, remains entrenched in history. In popular culture, this legend persists between political ambition and the quest for transcendence, reminding us that the fall of the dynasty, though brutal, did not erase the legacy of its founder. This tumultuous chapter continues to spark interest worldwide, fueling curiosity about the rise and fall of an empire in a single generation. Yet, despite the rapid fall of his dynasty, Qin Shi Huang had already etched his legacy into the bedrock of history. By unifying China, implementing centralized reforms, and creating the title of emperor, he laid the foundations of a political order that would endure for over 2 millennia. From dynasty to dynasty, this idea of a unified empire would survive through the ages, until the last emperor of China abdicated in 1912, ending an era initiated by the first emperor himself.